Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore lashing out at his accusers and attacking his critics as President Trump urges voters to reject his liberal rival. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
And good morning, Sandra.
Good morning.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer. Well, you know, there's just over 3 weeks to go before voters go to the polls in Alabama's special election on December 12th. And Roy Moore's campaign, while challenging two of his female accusers harshly yesterday. This as his opponent, Democrat Doug Jones, faces fire from the White House. The president telling reporters that he does not want to see a liberal, he says, like Jones in office.
I can tell you one thing for sure. We don't need a liberal person in there, a Democrat. Jones, I've looked at his record. It's terrible in crime. It's terrible in the border. It's terrible in the military. He denies it. Look, he denies it. I mean, if you look at what is really going on and you look at all the things that have happened over the last 48 hours, he totally denies it. He says it didn't happen.
Jonathan Seri, live in Birmingham, Alabama. What's been the reaction to the president's comments?
Good morning, Sandra. Well, when President Trump weighed in on Roy Moore, it sounded less of an endorsement of the Republican than a rebuke of the Democrat. Now, Doug Jones has responded to those comments. Here's what he said.
I'm going to let the people of Alabama make that decision. I feel like my record speaks for itself, and I don't have to have the president or anyone else to talk about it or try to label it.
Emory political science professor Andra Gillespie says the president's decision to weigh in on the Alabama race may have more to do with protecting his agenda on Capitol Hill.
The Trump administration appears to be trying to thread the needle. They're, in a really precarious situation. You've got Republicans who have a razor-thin majority in the Senate. If Roy Moore loses the seat, then that only makes the margin even more narrow, which is going to make it easier for legislation to stalemate.
And for that reason, many conservative voters in this state say they simply could not vote for a Democrat in this race. Now, in order to win, Doug Jones is going to have to convince some of those voters to cross party lines or just hope that they're so apathetic about this race that they don't turn out at the polls on Election Day, Sandra.
Meanwhile, what's Roy Moore doing?
Yeah, Roy Moore is spending less time out in public than his Democratic challenger is. Instead, he's choosing to appear with commentators who are more sympathetic to his cause. Take a listen.
I never dated underage women, and I never engaged in sexual misconduct with anybody. I mean, you have to understand, I was deputy district attorney, then the circuit judge. I go by the law.
And Moore says his campaign is still in the process of gathering evidence to debunk claims against him of sexual impropriety. Sandra?
All right, Jonathan Seri, thank you.
And for more on this, let's talk to Guy Benson. He's the political editor at townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Welcome, Guy. Well, you know what the critics are saying, and the Democrats are saying, that the Republicans rather side with an accused child molester just to get that GOP vote in the Senate.
And that would be a potent line of attack if Roy Moore wins the election. The National Party has tossed Roy overboard, right? The RNC, the NRSC, they've severed ties with him in terms of funding and other things. But if President Trump steps up this rhetoric, not just criticizing Moore's liberal opponent, but also perhaps going down there and campaigning for him as he suggested he might, I think what Democrats will say is, here's the leader of the Republican Party campaigning for someone who has been credibly accused by 9 women now of sexual misconduct and creeping on high school girls when he was in his 30s.
Well, he's denying it on one hand. On the other hand, you've got his supporters yesterday had that news conference at the steps of the Capitol, and they pointed out that it's up to Alabamians, not the National Party, and it's up to the local Alabamians there. So let's say the president keeps up his rhetoric, keeps up his tweeting in defense of Moore, even without using his name. Could that be enough to tip the race?
It might be. It's a very red state. And the point that the president made, and that you're going to hear from Moore's supporters, even those who believe him. So the governor of the state says she believes the accusers, but still needs to vote for Moore because you have to keep the seat out of the hands of the Democrats. I don't know how you look at that from a moral perspective. Politically, it makes sense because it's such a razor-thin margin in the Senate. And I noticed the comment from Doug Jones, the Democrat in the race. He said, "Oh, I'll let other people determine what my record is." He's not talking about his record because he is extremely liberal by any standard, particularly for a candidate for office in Alabama.
Well, we have a comment that Doug Jones made about all this. Let's listen.
They're the same ones, by the way, that are simply saying, oh, pay no attention to the allegations against Roy Moore. He's a Republican. By God, we'll vote for him anyway. That is wrong, people. That is wrong.
Oh, he just made that point that you just made. Is there a possibility, and I raised this in an earlier issue, that he gets elected, then he gets booted and expelled from the Senate, and yet Governor Ivey can then appoint another Republican? And
if Moore wins.
If Moore wins. And that's the way around all this. And you can tell the Alabamians, hey, you want to keep this GOP seat? Vote for him. He'll get booted out, potentially, and then we can still have a Republican seat.
Possibly. That's a pretty convoluted way of going about it. I would point out there's a new ad down in Alabama that Jones's campaign is running, highlighting quotes from Ivanka Trump and Jeff Sessions and Richard Shelby, all criticizing Moore. Shelby saying he would never vote for Moore. Ivanka Trump saying there's a special place in hell for people who target children. And they're saying these are conservatives attacking Moore. That's the line that Jones hopes will work. He's going to do the moral indignation, which I think is justified, but he wants to deflect away from his own record and say it's safe for conservatives to support me because Moore is so odious. Let's not talk about my support for abortion through all 9 months. Let's not talk about my position on taxes or the Second Amendment or Obamacare. And that's the smart play for him right now.
So if this all becomes about Moore and these allegations, how does it play out?
Well, that's what it's become. I mean, this entire race, all of the oxygen is about Roy Moore. And the question is, will Trump weigh in more heavily on his behalf? Will he go down there?
Do you think he will?
And I don't know. I think in his gut he wants to. It's tough to tell. Of course, he endorsed Luther Strange in the primary.
Even if he keeps speaking out at the White House, he doesn't have to physically go there,
right,
to support him.
And that's sort of the signal of like, hey, Alabama, I endorse the other guy. I'm not totally thrilled with Moore necessarily, but who do you want in that Senate seat? We're Republicans, aren't we? That's the message that Trump's going to bring home, as we saw sort of indicated yesterday in those comments.
All right, Guy Benson, thank you. Good to see you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. I guess you're going to be a lucky guy later on today. But
yes, on Outnumbered.
I don't
Looking forward to it.
We're getting the cat out of the bag on that one.
It's fine. They tweeted it.
Okay,
it's out.
All right, Guy, thanks. Sandra?
You're watching. All right, dramatic new video showing the moment a North Korean soldier risked his life to escape to South Korea. Video showing the man sprinting from his Jeep toward the DMZ, which separates the two Koreas. 4 North Korean soldiers then appear, firing shots at their fleeing comrade as he darts into South Korea. The man is hit several times and lies motionless on the ground, with South Korean soldiers eventually pulling him to safety. Benjamin Hall live in London. Benjamin, how did this North Korean soldier pull this off?
Yeah, good morning, Sandra. First of all, an incredible amount of bravery. This is the most heavily fortified border in the world. Tens of thousands of troops on both sides. And this shootout, together with this recovery, is worthy of one of the great Cold War dramas. It started at around 3 p.m. on November the 13th as this Jeep speeds towards the border. It crosses what is known, or was once known as the Bridge of No Return, where prisoner exchanges once took place, before then getting stuck in a ditch right before the border. The North Koreans respond quickly, emerging from various buildings in the joint security area and sprinting after him. They catch up to him right on the border and they fire 40 rounds at close range, and he falls down on the South Korean side. It's about 40 minutes later that 2 South Korean soldiers crawl up to him, grab hold of him and drag him to safety. Now, this was only the 4th defection across the DMZ in 3 years. It's the first cross-border shooting in more than 3 decades, and the US military have said that it is a real violation of the armistice between the two sides, not just because the North Koreans fired across into the south, but because one North Korean soldier actually chased him across before realizing where he was and running back. But incredible, incredible footage. Sandra?
Unbelievable watching that play out there. And as you saw those South Korean soldiers dragging the North Korean soldier to safety, what more do we know about that soldier's condition?
Well, crucially, we know he's going to survive. The doctors have done a number of surgeries on him. They've removed some of the bullets. He was shot 5 times. But it was while operating on him that they discovered another incredible thing. He was riddled with parasites, some over 10 inches long, unlike some they've ever seen in the past. And they say that this is evidence of the terrible living conditions and poor nutrition in North Korea's military. Not only that, but his doctors say he is now awake, he is now talking, and he's watching American movies, including Transformers and Bruce Almighty. So not only has he survived this incredible feat, but he's also waking up now to an incredible new world, and that also is going to take some getting used to. Sandra?
What a story. Benjamin Hall, thank you.